My name is Julia Harmon, 42 years old, working as a financial analyst for a mid-sized tech firm. I live with my husband, Greg, and his elderly father in a modest suburban home. We have no children, a choice we once made together but now feels like a lingering topic of quiet tension. Greg and I met a decade ago at an industry conference. His charm was magnetic, drawing people to him effortlessly. At the time, he was a rising star in his field, confident, witty, and ambitious. It felt like destiny when we ended up seated together at dinner. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. By the end of the evening, he asked for my number, and I gave it to him with a nervous smile. From then on, he pursued me with relentless enthusiasm, calling every evening and showing up with flowers after my late work shifts. It didn't take long before I fell for him. Our marriage, at first, felt like a dream. Greg was attentive and affectionate, always bringing small surprises home after work and making plans for weekends. But after a few years, the sparkle began to dim. The thoughtful gestures became rare, replaced by curt responses and long evenings spent with his father. He began to blame work stress, and I, trying to be supportive, accepted his explanations. Things changed even more when Greg suggested that I leave my job. "It's just temporary," he said. "Dad needs care, and I'll take care of us financially." Hesitant but wanting to keep the peace, I agreed. Life as a homemaker was an adjustment. Greg's father, Richard, was kind but demanding, and his needs often consumed my days. As for Greg, his absences became more frequent, and when I asked about them, he would dismiss me with vague explanations about work or errands for his father. One evening, as I was cleaning out the attic, I stumbled upon a box filled with documents and photographs. Among them was a photo of Greg, not with his coworkers as he had claimed, but at a lavish party. A woman stood beside him laughing, her arm looped through his. My stomach dropped as I realized that his work excuses might be covering for something else. But instead of confronting him, I decided to wait and watch. The days that followed were filled with quiet observation. I noticed little things I had previously ignored. His phone always face down on the table, hushed conversations that ended when I entered the room, and the faint smell of perfume clinging to his jacket. Doubt turned into certainty, but I needed proof. One Friday evening, Greg announced he would be working late. After he left, I called his office. The receptionist hesitated before saying, "I'm sorry, Greg left hours ago. He said he had a personal appointment." My hands trembled as I hung up the phone. It was the confirmation I dreaded. The next day, I decided to follow him. Greg left the house in a rush, muttering something about errands. I waited a few minutes before grabbing my keys and driving after him. My heart raced as I trailed his car, keeping a safe distance. He pulled into a cafe, and I parked across the street. From my vantage point, I saw him walk inside and greet a woman with a hug that lingered too long to be platonic. My chest tightened as I watched them laugh and share what seemed like an intimate conversation. I snapped a few photos with my phone, my mind already racing with questions. Who was she? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, why? When Greg returned home that evening, I pretended nothing was wrong. Over dinner, I asked how his day had been. He lied effortlessly, saying he had spent hours at the office. My stomach churned, but I forced a smile. If he could lie so easily, how much of our life had been built on deception? The following weeks were a blur of tension and quiet anguish. I avoided direct confrontation, unsure of what I would even say. Instead, I began to prepare. I contacted a lawyer to discuss my options and started looking for part-time work. The house, once a sanctuary, felt like a cage, and I longed for the freedom to rebuild my life. Then came the night everything changed. Greg's father, Richard, had gone to bed early, leaving Greg and me alone in the living room. He seemed distracted, checking his phone every few minutes. Summoning my courage, I asked, "Is there something you want to tell me?" Greg looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" "You've been distant lately," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I feel like there's something you're not sharing with me." He hesitated, then laughed nervously. "You're imagining things, Julia. Everything's fine." But everything was not fine. That night I packed a small bag and stayed with a friend. I needed space to think, to breathe. Over the next few days, I pieced together my plan. I filed for separation, notifying Greg through my lawyer. When he received the papers, his reaction was explosive. He accused me of betrayal, of giving up on our marriage. But his anger only solidified my resolve. In the months that followed, I focused on reclaiming my independence. I found a full-time job at a financial firm and moved into a small apartment downtown. The divorce was messy, with Greg fighting over every detail, but I stood my ground. The woman I had seen at the cafe never resurfaced in the proceedings, leaving me to wonder if she had been just one of many secrets Greg had kept. The day our divorce was finalized, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. 20 years of marriage had ended, leaving behind memories both beautiful and bitter. But as I signed the final documents, I knew I had made the right decision. Months passed, and life took on a rhythm of its own. I immersed myself in work, finding joy in the challenges and camaraderie of my colleagues. My apartment became a sanctuary, filled with light and peace. One evening, as I was organizing some old files, I stumbled across a familiar envelope. Inside were the photos I had taken that day at the cafe. For the first time, I could look at them without anger, only curiosity. Who was that woman? What role had she truly played in the unraveling of my marriage? A part of me wanted to dig deeper, but another part knew it no longer mattered. I had reclaimed my life, and no shadow from the past could take that away. Every day felt like a step forward, and I relished the freedom to decide my path without compromise. Now, a year later, I find myself smiling more than I have in years. The weight of deception has lifted, and I've begun to rediscover who I am. Life is far from perfect, but it is mine to shape. And for the first time in a long time, I feel free.